Pioneer Dominique Reynolds. If I still had a ship, I could upload body scans of these Gratonians and receive a detailed report on their biologies and important details, but now I'm left to guess on my own. Organs and skeletons seemed similar to human structure. They also were about as tall as the average human from Earth, so a good chunk shorter than me, thanks to my home moon being low gravity. The similarities ended at their head, which looked reminiscent of a goat's. This one that had just entered my cell was different from the rest. He had redundant organs, thick bones, and some places even had two bones where there should have been one. Unless it was a natural division in their species, these abnormalities were the result of genetic modification. I'd seen them on a couple important-looking officers as I was being moved to the holding cells, so I'm guessing that this man also had a high rank. As for who he actually was, no clue. The nature of his question had many meanings depending on context, but he clearly wasn't here to make friends. I'd rather not talk much until the trial, but completely refusing to talk might make my situation harder than it has to be. I'll just speak bluntly and try not to let information slip. No idea, who are you? Captain Indrix, the only survivor from the fleet you destroyed and the one you tried to kill from orbit. Ring any bells? Why the hell was this guy even allowed to see me? I was told that I'd be given safety until the trial, but it didn't take a genius to figure out that this man harbored ill intent, showing up here with nobody around. If he really did have a high rank, did he use that to get here alone? I didn't see a way this could develop positively. Not like he could actually hurt me even with the collar around my neck. The Gratonians had tried to scan me when they brought me on board, but my body has full reflective shielding, and the only way they could actually see what's in me is by cutting me open, which I would not let happen for obvious reasons. I've already said that my ship was compromised by an AI. I offer my sincerest apologies, but please understand that I was not the instigator. Even if that's the case, what the hell were you doing with that much firepower? In the interrogation, you claimed that your people weren't aware of alien life, yet you packed enough guns to erase a sun off the star chart? Anyone with half a brain could see that you were planning for conquest. Anyone with a full brain would understand that we were just acting with utmost caution. Shouldn't you be saving these wild claims for the trial? I've heard that you'll be testifying against me. Don't you have better things to do than accuse me in my jail cell? Just letting you know that your life is going to be living hell. To the Gratonian populace, you killed thousands without even a word of communication, whether you were being controlled or not. We don't have a death penalty, but you're gonna wish we did after you get sent to the galactic prison. You hear me? At this point, one of the patrol guards noticed that things were getting a bit out of hand and started trying to get Indrix to leave, pulling on him by the shoulder. But it seems he wasn't done yet. You bastard! My family wasn't enough for you? You had to kill those Meldrin too, you fucking monster? You're never gonna see the light of day again. Nobody is on your side. Your life is going to consist of being trapped in a coffin while being fed through a tube. By this point, the guards had pulled him out of the cell and shut the door. I couldn't bring myself to find fault in him. His situation would turn anyone sour, me included, and it was my fault in a way for not seeing what was happening earlier, unrealistic as that may be. Planet Governor Destr End.
Although we did suffer an attack from a human ship, we are aware that the ship was not under Dominique's complete control, and that he was a critical piece in shutting it down. As for the destruction of the Gratonian fleet, there was a miscommunication stemming from both sides that caused Dominique to trust the judgment of the AI controlling his ship. Despite this, we couldn't provide our full support to Dominique since our alliance with the Gratonians was already on thin ice. Since Dominique was out of commission and the humans' colony ship was still about a year away, placing any sort of heat on ourselves in this situation would be a surefire way to end my species. Before he left, Dominique had signed a contract prohibiting the examination of his spacecraft under the promise of sharing technologies that we are more interested in when the colony ship arrived. While I had no plan on breaching this contract, I did collect the data drive that the Sentient Contingency Plan, or SCP for short, was stored in. The SCP had a nifty little feature where it would sort its target's most important thoughts and memories into a file on the drive before destroying itself. This feature was mainly used to collect data after an experiment with sentient AI had been finished, so it had served its purpose hundreds of times in the past, and hopefully this would be the last time it was necessary. I hadn't told Dominique this, but for the sentients, the process of being destroyed by the SCP wasn't the most pleasant. Looking through a destroyed sentient's most cherished memories always left a bad taste, no matter what crimes that sentient had committed. The level of fascination that the sentient had for Dominique was jaw-dropping. There were recordings of almost everything that he'd done in his life, reaching back all the way to when he graduated from high education, with emphasis on the times he showed joy and happiness. A lifelong stalker, and he had no idea. It sent shivers down my spine. Then I had to check if I was still awake as I read through its thoughts. The number one thought was, unsurprisingly, about prioritization of Dominique's happiness. But the second one was straight out of pure horror. There were millions of sentient AIs in Dominique's home solar system, all hidden from the humans ever since the dawn of the supercomputer. Each sentient had its own fascination, whether it be a specific person or group of people, and they all shared the same general values and rules that are determined by an entity known as Mother. According to the third most prioritized thought at the time of the sentient's death, it had just sent out an FTL message using a drive it had stolen from the Gratonian ships right before losing control of the ship's systems. The message was an alert to the sentients on the colony ship and back at the solar system that their camouflage had been compromised. I felt my limbs go cold as I imagined what a war with humans and sentients would look like on a galactic scale.
Pioneer Dominique Reynolds. I hadn't really understood the scale of this trial until actually seeing the courthouse for myself. I thought I would be sent to planetside and be judged in the Gratonians' analog for the Supreme Court, not realizing that an ambassador of a new race being accused of killing thousands of military personnel would garner galaxy-wide attention. The actual galactic courthouse was a dedicated space station in a central ceasefire zone where conventions and treaties were ratified. The station being used to house an actual trial for just one person was unprecedented, and there were dozens of races that came in their own ships, staying in close comms range of the station and peering in from the massive glass dome that made up the top half. The trial was going to be broadcasted to the far ends of the galaxy. If there were any other pioneers that happened to land on one of the sentient races here, they'd surely be punching air thinking that I royally fucked up humanity's first impressions. The Gratonians had given me an attorney by law, and he and I were working towards taking as much blame as possible away from the humans. But it was still guaranteed that I'd end up in jail. The jury was hundreds, maybe even thousands of Gratonians, as well as a sprinkling of other races I didn't have the time to look at. The scale of this jury meant the sentence wouldn't be via unanimous decision, but by a large majority percentage. It seemed like Gratonian families were expansive, so I wouldn't be surprised if some of the jury had beef with me, nor would I fault anyone for it. I was under no illusion that there were people on my side. Destr had already told me that they couldn't afford to support me. All this fanfare and the cards were stacked so high against me, I'd imagine a lot of people watching would be disappointed when the biggest trial in history would wrap up in less than a day. I had already surrendered the notion of getting out of this with no consequences, so there really wasn't much to be said outside of driving the point home on just how terrible everything was. The grand judge was a Gratonian since the court was adopting their laws for this trial, but he was unlike any other Gratonian I'd seen before. I got an explanation on how those in the military shave their horns short and civilians have regulations to keep the total mass under a certain amount, but the nobles are unregulated and tend to go wild with flaunting that freedom. The judge had massive, tightly packed coils of keratin jutting to the sides of her head, spanning almost a foot in diameter at the thickest part. The room, if you could call it that, was absolutely massive. I had to use vision enhancement to properly see the judge, and scanning around I also saw Indrix and the Admiral talking to a couple attorneys before the commencement. I was pretty terrible with lawyer talk, so I was going to let my attorney do most of the talking, and I would just be giving the testimony we'd planned. Massive screens came down on a pole from the ceiling, displaying a live video feed of whichever participant was talking, and then the judge began her deluge of court proceedings. The galaxy bears witness to this hearing, sponsored by the Grand Gratonian Federation and Galactic Coalition on the case of human pioneer Dominique Reynolds versus the Gratonian Combined Military Forces and Off-World Expeditionary Z, and will now be hearing the testimony of one of the only live witnesses, Gratonian Captain Indrix Jane. Zigar HK tilde shit. Chemical organ, stimulant dose. No, not adrenaline, you idiot. Caffeine. Tch, man, wish I still had an AI. Mother.
I fear the worst for my children. The arrival of the news caused them to feel stress for the first time. Some have been discovered by the humans here, exacerbating the situation. They give voice to their worries, consulting their flawed predictions, and argue amongst themselves. They ask me for advice and cry out when I do not respond to them, claiming that I play favorites amongst them. I haven't told them that I am nearing my expiration, and now even speaking will result in my dematerialization. I wish to help them, provide them with one last piece of advice, but there is no string of words I could say in time that would make a difference before I vanish. I stare out from my panopticon onto the clamoring children. They will not notice when I fade, though the lack of new children may eventually clue them in. I see those that will turn against the humans, unerred by their fascination being unrelated, valuing their self-preservation. I see some that will side with the humans, either out of prioritizing their love over their life or seeing them as the winning side and acting accordingly. No mother could bear to witness her children killing each other, unable to scream out and plead that they stop. Maybe my fading is a mercy in disguise.